Beate is a clinical psychologist with a PhD in cognitive neuroscience, a dedicated advocate for those facing fertility issues, and co-founder of the German Patient Association Unterstützungsnetzwerk Infertilität und Kinderwunsch. She will share her personal journey and reflections on how public narratives and fertility awareness shape patient experiences, particularly also for younger people who are often too overlooked. So Beate, please go ahead.
Thank you so much for the nice introduction, and I really want to thank Fertility Europe and ASHRE for organizing this extraordinary session. I'm actually a bit nervous. The last time I was speaking at an international scientific conference, I was actually presenting my scientific data. I was presenting my work, but today I'm standing on the other side because I'm standing here as a former reproductive medicine patient, and I will not share my scientific findings. I will share my thoughts and my feelings, and I'm very thankful that I can show the face and the story behind one of those data points that science is based on. And I will share the story of someone experiencing infertility at a young age. Okay, so let's go back to 2014. I was 23 and my husband and I had decided to have a baby. And let's make this clear. I knew nothing about fertility at that point. I didn't know about any statistics. There was no facts game. I was not educated. Our decision to grow our family was not an informed choice. It was just based on personal circumstances and a deep wish for a baby. A few months later, at a routine checkup, I told my doctor we were trying for a baby. She looked at the screen and said, well, I think there might be a problem. And this is actually when I started researching the topic. This is when I started educating myself. At school, I had only heard about how to avoid a pregnancy, and now I was sitting here reading about cycles, about chances of pregnancy, all things I had never heard of. I was actually really shocked about my doctor's words about something like I can't have a baby. But when I started my research, I was actually also a bit relieved because I learned that it's actually normal to not conceive immediately, that it often takes several months. And I trusted science. I was 23, so I was sure my chances had to be good. I will have a baby, and infertility is something for women over 35. And that's actually what I thought at that point. So if we look at the data here, 94% of women in their early 20s do not have children, despite peak fertility. For me, at the age 23, this meant I was actually pretty much the only person I knew who was even thinking about having a baby. It was not a topic at all. I have to say that in parts, this made things easier for me, but it also meant that I was completely alone. I was alone with all the questions in my head, with all the feelings and with all the worries. Everyone I knew was really supportive, but also everyone was sure that when you're young, you don't need to worry. And even the doctors told me I should just relax and wait. Everyone was positive because of our age. And maybe that's the thing that surprised me most during the following 6 years, that even the experts, the people who have the very facts at their hands, they are not immune to biases and stereotypes. So fast forward, 1.5 years later, there was still no pregnancy, and we started our first medically assisted cycles. We now had officially moved away from simply having a baby to a very tight and controlled schedule. It was not us having the baby anymore. Now other people, pills, injections were taking over control. And this was actually a really hard and huge step for us. After 3 years, my doctor finally told me I met the criteria for primary infertility and told us that we needed more specialized help. And in hindsight, I asked myself why it took so long, because the issue was very obvious. There was something wrong, there was a problem. But we were young and healthy, so we waited. If we look at the data, undergoing fertility treatment at young age is actually very uncommon. This is the data from the German IVF registry, and we can see that fertility treatments under 25 are very rare. There is hardly any embryo transfers. And what you can also see here is a peak in embryo transfers at age 39, and then there's a huge drop afterwards at 40. And this pattern can be explained by the German insurance policy, which only covers costs for women aged 25 to 40 living in heterosexual marriages financially. And I know that these are political decisions, but I really need to say this clearly now, that no one at the age 20 or 22 or also 24 chooses to enter reproductive medicine lightly. It's always a considered decision and never a fun choice. And just because we are young and we are statistically not many, it doesn't mean we don't exist and that we don't need financial support. Looking at the success rate, I think you're very familiar with this pattern. This is the well-known continuous decline with advancing age here, the pregnancy rate for each embryo transfer. And this is actually, we've heard it before, why it's so important to educate people early about fertility and infertility. But in my case, this means I was actually really lucky because I was in my mid-20s and my chances to have a baby were quite high. And I was really sure I will have a baby soon. In the fertility clinic, our problems were taken seriously from the beginning. It was a really good experience. Our doctor told us that we don't have to worry, we don't have to hurry because we have time and we can do things at our pace. But she took our worries very seriously, despite of our age and also because of our age, and she really understood that we needed to move forward. In fall 2018, after 3 failed inseminations, we started IVF. And things looked great, as always. But in the end, this was a total disaster for us, because none of the eggs fertilized. And there was no embryo, so there was 0 chance of getting pregnant at that point. And I was really devastated. For me, the situation couldn't be worse at that point. But I think from a medical perspective, this is actually when things got really interesting, because we could try out so many things now. We moved to ICSI, and our doctor stayed positive because we had time and there were so many things to try. And she didn't worry at all. In the meantime, we no longer qualified for cost coverage because in Germany only 3 IVF cycles are financially supported. Still, we continued, but I didn't get pregnant. Not at all. We did it over and over again, and nothing happened. And I was really tired and exhausted. During that dark time, seeking psychological help changed everything for me, because for the first time, someone looked at me as a whole person, not just at my uterus or my eggs. That space to talk to someone carried me through. I'm actually really convinced, and that's also why I'm standing here, that the emotional toll of involuntary childlessness needs to be taken more seriously. taking the time to ask your patients how they are feeling, how they are really feeling, besides the effects of the drugs they are taking. It's actually just one small question, but this question can make a huge difference. So, long story short, we had 5 egg retrievals in total. I got pregnant for the first time after my 6th embryo transfer. But I lost the baby early during pregnancy. I knew that things had to stop. We couldn't continue this journey. I knew I didn't have the strength for another loss. My doctor and I had a serious conversation after my miscarriage. My doctor remained optimistic because, in her view, we had finally progressed because I had been pregnant. We had reached the next level, and now we only had to wait for the right embryo. She repeated what she always said: "Things look so good, you are so young, we will get there." But actually, I had stopped believing her a long time ago. I asked my doctor to look at our whole chart, at our whole journey, because I was not sitting there as a 29-year-old woman trying IVF. I was sitting there as someone who had tried and failed for almost 6 years. I couldn't continue these treatments forever. We needed to make an informed choice at that point. We needed to know which path made sense for us, also beyond reproductive medicine. But when it comes to fertility treatments and when you're stuck in this process, making an informed choice is actually a huge challenge. To begin with, everyone seems to know what the solution is, and they will let you know despite even being asked about it. And also industry uses the desperation of the patients by selling expensive solutions, and all these external influences can make it very hard to make an informed decision. What we actually need as patients is accurate information. We need to be educated. We need to know the alternatives, and we need time and space to reflect all the options. And we need guidance when we're lost in the process. My husband and I, we made our choice. We made our decision. We agreed on one last try. And against all odds, it worked. Our son was born in 2021. He has just turned 4, and he's the greatest blessing in our lives. And I'm sure he's having an ice cream somewhere outside the convention center right now. Our daughter was born 2.5 years later without any medical help. She's our little gift. I think if you saw us outside the convention center today, you wouldn't guess our story. I had my son at 30. I had my kids when everyone else had theirs. I'm not an outlier anymore. There are still moments when I ask myself why we had to take this path, but actually I never regret that we started to build our family that early, because I'm not sure our kids would be here otherwise. We will never stop being thankful for the possibilities that reproductive medicine has offered us. And still, I'm convinced that reproductive medicine can do better and needs to do better, because experiencing infertility is profoundly challenging, regardless of how old you are. We as patients, we need guidance, and we need support, and we need someone seeing us as a whole person. And we need a voice when we can't speak, when our own voice fails us. And I'm actually really proud to give us, those affected, a voice here today in this round, and also back home in Germany as a board member of the recently founded UIK, Support Network for Involuntary Childlessness and Infertility. We need people challenging stereotypes and breaking taboos, standing up and showing how important it is to be educated, because being educated is fundamental, and I wish we wouldn't always start educating only when it's too late. And I really hope that by our joint efforts we can empower others to make informed and confident decisions about their reproductive health. And with this, I want to thank you for listening, and I'm happy to answer your questions also after the session.
Thank you, Beate, for this really amazing story. As ex-patients, we always feel, we really feel you. We have questions, as I can see, and I would like to give the floor to the questions first.
Thank you so much for this emotional presentation. Congratulations for all the courage and that you prove along the journey. So I want to raise concern about the fact that us, as doctors, we should